I'm not sure what the turning point was. It might have been nonstop blizzards for 7 days in a row, that winter of 1977. Or it might have been getting busted by our landlord for growing 6-foot marijuana plants in the middle of the organic garden. Luckily, opportunity knocked. Cal State Fullerton knew nothing of that. There was no formal legal. We just had to burn them in front of the landlord. Thus began 38 wonderful years at Cal State Fullerton, where he taught a wide range of courses to undergraduate and graduate students. Steve Walk was one of his favorite colleagues those many years. Steve?
Well, so I met Ken 24 years ago, or I should say that Ken welcomed me to Cal State Fullerton 24 years ago in the way that Ken always did, which is to say hello, welcome me to his home for Thanksgiving, which I spent several Thanksgivings there, played in the John Henry Johnson football game. I never won Best Uni. I tried with the whole Michigan State. It didn't work very well, but, Cal State Fullerton is a very unique place, and I don't know of anybody who was a better match as a faculty hire at Cal State Fullerton, and some of his friends were here. Roberta Rickley, who was hired at the same time, is here, and what a great hire. Incidentally, I'd like to recognize President Fran Bejing and his wife Julie, who is here from Cal State Fullerton. Thanks so much for being here. Filled with moral virtue was his speech, and gladly would he learn and gladly teach. This fragment of verse plucked from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales sums up for me so much of Ken at Cal State Fullerton. In his teaching, his writing, and his consulting work, Ken was the most genuine educator I've ever known, and those who've had the pleasure of watching him work, and I'm not really sure it was work for Ken, left that experience changed, many moved. While there was naturally some variation in content, you always got the same Ken. He would often ask for the gift of your presence, right? He wanted you to be present, here, now, which says so much about him. And of course, he would naturally reciprocate. Of course, he would recount the myth of Sisyphus at some stage, draw out the many implications, and tell us we were all pushing the rock. He'd lead you to the power of the present moment, and you would never be able to think the same way again. In and through his work, Ken both pushed his own considerably sized rock up a slope steeper than I think most of us realize, and himself personified so much of what Cal State Fullerton has been as an institution, an achiever of seemingly improbable feats, using a combination of brilliance, deep commitment, creativity, and a lot of hard work. I'd like you to imagine Ken, a young faculty member in physical education, an area often marginalized in universities, in some cases not even present at some universities. He's also a philosopher in physical education, an area marginalized in physical education. Arguing that existentialist ideas some philosophers found more literary than philosophical, could be the starting point for introducing the mental game into sports, which many in psychology and even sports psychology saw as charlatanism, absent a degree or licensure in psychology, and which many in the sports world, athletes and coaches alike, saw as an unmistakable sign of weakness. And so it was up that steep hill that Ken pushed, seeking then to share his brilliant ideas with friends and colleagues and coaches at Cal State Fullerton. And being Titans, many there discovered that they had a gold mine, Or I should say Ken showed them that they had a gold mine within each one of them. Many, many hard-won successes later. Was it anything but pure poetry? Certainly for me. That it was the Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs, the home of the largest mountain and rock in Major League Baseball, where Ken found his voice. I used to skip school to go watch fruitless game after Cubs game. So it seems perfect. I want to close by saying that though there are many, many things about Ken that I will take with me and that we will all take with us. Over the last 5 weeks or so, the thing that is sticking with me is his voice. And I've seen and read many interviews about Ken, and they all make reference to Ken's voice. Ken's voice is an earworm in my head, and probably in all of your heads as well. And it's the most pleasant earworm. It is, I'm not really sure what was in Ken's secret sauce, but it worked. And I've been trying to analyze it, and what I came up with was his voice was like music. Not quite exactly the cadence or the lyrics, but something musical about it. Short sentences, strong verbs, repeat. My favorite one sentence from Ken, favorite one word sentence from Ken is this: you. I say it all the time. There's my daughter, I say it to her all the time. So on behalf of my colleagues at Cal State Fullerton, I want to express my deep sorrow, as well as my unending gratitude for Ken epitomizing the ideals of the university for so long. Claire, Mo, and Nina, please know that we will all carry Ken's unmistakable voice in our minds and in our hearts.
As Steve indicated, Cal State Fullerton was an incubator for Ken's work in developing mental skills for athletes. Lynn Rogers, who is here today, was the women's gymnastics coach. And as the story goes, Ken was watching the girls fall off the 4-inch wide balance beam with abandon. And he suggested to Lynn that there might be a better approach. Lynn was receptive, and thus began the journey. Dick Wolf, the men's gymnastic coach, quickly saw the merits of the mental game and got his team involved, as did Augie Garrido, Cal State Fullerton baseball coach. Ken always gave credit to these three men. They were all highly successful coaches with winning records, and they were open and receptive to his ideas. And they were willing to let him learn from them. And therein lies a key to Ken's success. He didn't approach any athlete or any team with the answer. First, he listened and learned from the person. The graduate students over the years were always a very special group. He forged deep and meaningful relationships with many of them. And I've asked Neale Smith to represent them. Before he does, I do want to acknowledge that many of his students, grad students, are here today. From Boston, from Anchorage, from Iowa, wow, New York, San Diego, LA, Orange, and Tampa. Neale? Wow.
Well, firstly, I'm so impressed with the speakers ahead of me. They've barely lost it. I think I might break that trend. I've been honoured by Claire twice in the last few weeks to speak here today. Thank you very much. And to be there at the end with Ken. That was one of the most heart-wrenching yet beautiful experiences I've ever had. When I go, I want to go in a similar way, surrounded by love, listening to my favorite music, and high on morphine. At one point in my metaphysical trying to communicate with Ken's consciousness, I'm trying to reach out to him. I'm like, mate, how you doing? And he says, yeah, pretty good, just enjoying the buzz. So for all of us who knew Ken, I mean, it's a heavy, heavy loss for me, but it's a heavy loss for so many of us. He was that special guy that would connect, be present, and we all had that deep, deep love and connection for Ken. Being asked to speak on behalf of the students is such an obligation and responsibility, because there were hundreds of grad students, thousands of undergrad students, and thousands of athletes. And I just want to let those students know that when in my opportunity to say my last goodbye to Ken, I took the time to represent all of us and to thank him for all the time and care that he gave to all of us. As a student, we always wanted our teachers to be competent, relevant, and available. Ken was that plus, plus, plus. It wasn't until we first started going to conferences that we knew what a rock star Ken was. Yeah. Like, we enjoyed the classes, we thought he was great, we'd go away somewhere, and then we really realized who Ken was. You know, he was a star in our field, a leader in our field, and someone that we were proud to be Ken's kids. All of us share that obligation and responsibility moving forward to carry that message of care, being present. There's so many stories. I cannot bring it to one. I think I'd just like to share the story about being in the garden with him. His garden was so important. It was his therapy. It was his grounding. He loved his garden. The first time he made dandelion salad for me, I'm like, Ken, what's a dandelion salad? I'm like, but anyway, I end up enjoying dandelion salads. But last year, we were out in the back garden having a G&T, which he made with beautiful care. They were great G&Ts. And we're watering the garden, and he was in that phase where he was capturing water, which, you know, the rainwater was better than the city water, so Ken would do it. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but he grew and kept earthworms, you know, because the fertilizer for that was better than the fertilizer you could buy. You know, there was so much about Ken that was like, if this is good enough, let's do it at this level. You know, so he asked me to help him with the watering. So I'm watering away, and he kept reminding me, well, really water it down to the roots, mate. And that's so summed up his life for me. He wasn't interested in a superficial watering. He was interested in a deep watering down to the roots. And I think the message is, whatever your garden is, water it down to the roots. Thank you, Ken.
Ken's work with elite athletes spanned the globe. His work with Olympic teams began in 1982 with women's softball. Over the years, he was involved with USA Olympic water polo, baseball, softball, men's and women's volleyball teams. He presented at Olympic training centers in India, Korea, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. I don't really know when Ken started working with Hugh McCutcheon, who took USA men's volleyball team to Bejing and came home with gold. But I do know that their professional and personal relationship continued well beyond the Olympics. On a recent trip this summer to Minnesota, Ken stayed with Hugh and his family, and when he came home, he told me how much he loved seeing Hugh and Wiz as parents, raising two wonderful children. Hugh?
Hi, everybody. 1 second here. It's hard, eh?
Yeah, really.
You lose your mate. Ken was, to me, embodied so much more than his profession. So I'll start with a brief anecdote and then try to expound more upon that. But I was coaching this USA men's team. We were okay, but we weren't very good. We'd just gotten 10th at the World Championships, and we'd gotten into a chance to try to qualify for the Olympic Games. And for those of you that live in that space, winning the Olympics is great, but it's even greater when you qualify, because that's a big gorilla to get off your back. And we'd had some issues, so we tried a couple of other people in the sports psychology field through more conventional parts, and people through the USOC, and some other bits and pieces, and we'll just say that they weren't the right fit. It wasn't the right thing for our team. And I'm from New Zealand, and a good friend of mine works with the All Blacks, the rugby team from New Zealand. And Ravi had just been down there about a year ago working with the rugby team down there, who, by the way, one of the most successful sporting franchises in history. I think they've got a win-loss percent of about 88% over 120 years. That being said, Ravi and I connected kind of through this circuitous route and grabbed lunch one day. This would be 2007-ish. So we're having lunch, and I'm telling him about the team and what's going on, and certainly telling him about the fact that we tried a couple of people and it hadn't worked out so good. And his response at the end of the lunch was just wonderful. It sums up so much about the man to me. He said, look, I'll talk to your team for 45 minutes, and if they want me back, cool, and if they don't, no worries. But we'll let them decide. He wasn't going to tell me he had answers. He wasn't going to tell me he could fix it. He wasn't going to tell me anything other than I'll give it a go, and I'll be good enough or I won't. And of course, he was good enough. He was great. And anyone here that works with teams knows that there is a lot of voices that come at them, but at times, especially as a head coach, you need a third-party advocate that's going to be able to deliver so many important messages. And Ken was just so perfect in that role, because he didn't know anything about volleyball, but he knew so much about performance. And so his ability to kind of diffuse any kind of threat relative to the volleyball piece, but just be so incredibly value-add relative to the performance piece was just an amazing thing. Not surprising, of course, to anyone who knew it, but it was amazing. And so there were some things in our sport that are a little bit like baseball. Serving is a closed-loop motor skill. We're in charge of all of that, and it's an overhead activity. But that was part of it. We had getting in the circle and getting out and taking a breath and finding a focal point and all the other things that we used to talk about. One that comes to mind today is trying to have a good shitty day. And it was great. And we went on and we got to win the Olympics Games. And it was wonderful, of course, to win it. But so much of the value of that particular journey was wrapped up in the 4 years to get to that moment where you got a chance to win it. And at the end of it, just being able to share that with Ken was beautiful. Since then, I started coaching the USA Women the year after we'd won the gold medal in Bejing, and Ken was involved with me there, and then now I'm at the University of Minnesota coaching a team there. And as Claire spoke to, Ken came out and spent some time. And just the other day, yesterday in fact, I was with the team and we're talking about our season. We're in pre-season right now, and there's so much of Ken that is with them, from focal points to the one that really resonated with him was "Bring it, bitch." So he lives in all of us, and I guess like all of you here, I'm going to miss my friend terribly. But his lessons and all of his wonderful stuff, of course, lives on in me and lives on in you through the teaching and the coaching and the influence that we get to have. So we don't lose him, we just don't get to see him. But he's with us, and I'm so profoundly grateful to have been a part of his life, and so glad he got to be a part of mine. So thanks, Claire and family. Thank you.
Ken's work with Olympic athletes as individuals included pairs, figure skaters, Todd and Jenny are here today, individual figure skaters, equestrian riders, and swimmers. One of those individual Olympic athletes is Markus Rogan, who swam for Austria, right? Yeah. I should also mention that Markus has played a really important role in one of my personal goals. Whenever Ken and I traveled on any occasion, and we did a lot of traveling, something we loved to do, I would drive him crazy until I could find a pool for my daily swim. One day, a couple of years ago, I realized that I had swum in the Olympic pool in Sydney, Australia, and the Olympic pool in Barcelona, Spain. Thus began my quest to swim in all the Olympic pools that have hosted the Summer Olympics.
Whoa.
I have completed 14 swims thus far,
Jeez.
with a few more big ones to go. And Markus helped me to gain access to the pool in Rome, Italy, which, by the way, is made completely of marble.
Wow.
Ken, I just want to say thank you. When I came to you, I was lost and just trying to get as many world records and money and girls as I could. As it turns out, that doesn't really lead to happiness. I was just really lonely. And you became the rock I didn't have. You said stop the bullshit. And you gave me back the joy in my sport. You said, hey, instead of just work and swim up and down the pool, just surf it. You know, I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he said, just body surf it. And you didn't know that when I was a child, we had these artificial wave pools in Vienna that I just loved. I was just body surfing. And these artificial wave pools, I had no idea that you could see it. So I found my passion again in my sport. And then as far as the girls go, that was a struggle. And one of the many times I came and said, hey, I found a new girl. He said, oh, Markus, come on. And we talked more. And he said, yeah. This one might be the right one for you. she's expecting our second son this week.
Ah.
And Neale, thank you for reminding me of the garden at your house again. We were in the garden, and like any good, well-trained psychologist, you had a very clear plan. We just made it up on the spot. You said, Markus, all this bullshit you're carrying with you, they're like bricks. And you ran around the garden and found these old bricks. You gave me 2 buckets. And you put all my bricks in my buckets, and you made me walk around all the dying dandelions.